Hello and welcome to another episode of Disc and Dice. This is episode 27 and it's going to be our last one for the year. So here's hoping it is a good one. My name is Tim and with me are my co-hosts JT and Paul. How are we going, fellas?
I'm doing pretty well.
I too am doing pretty well.
Now, there's a very good chance that that was a seamless intro to the episode because Paul would have edited out the long, awkward silence where neither JT or Paul answered me just then while they were waiting for the other person to say something.
You bet I absolutely did that in the future. So, people are wondering what on earth you were talking about right now.
I listened keenly back to last episode hoping that you had put in all like the sound effects that JT was asking for, but alas.
None of them were there.
Did you actually listen, JT?
I did this time.
All right.
Skimmed.
So
I skimmed it.
That's what we got to do, Paul. From now on, we just got to keep telling JT that we put his sound effects in, and he'll actually listen back to the episodes.
Yeah, I was about to say we should have started this by saying, JT, did you like the sound effects? Because then we could tell if he did listen to an episode.
Yeah, and I would have called you both lying trash if you said that. So
yeah, it'll be good when JT listens because then that'll get us up to 3 listens for each episode.
Hey. The big 3. Hey, speaking of stuff we were talking about last episode, Paul, have you got all of your Black Friday sale or Cyber Monday goodies? Has everything rocked up now?
Yes, they're all here now. So I got the last episode we mentioned, I got the Switch, like literally the day of the episode, I think. And I got the PS5, my God, PS4.
Oh.
Yeah, from the future. I got the PS...
you got a guy.
I got the PS4 a couple of days ago. I've had time to basically just plug it in and download the update that it needed to go online. But apart from that, I haven't really touched anything games-wise. In terms of what I got Uncharted 4, Uncharted Lost Legacy, and Spider-Man. And out of those, I would probably say Spider-Man is going to be first up. But yeah, haven't really had a chance to play around with that yet. But the Switch I have had for a while, well, for a couple of weeks at least. And as I mentioned last week, I got Pokemon Shield with that. So that's maybe one of the main things I've been playing since the last episode. So far, I would say I'm enjoying it. I really haven't played that much. I'm probably like 3 or 4 hours into it, which is really not a lot. I would probably say that it hasn't grabbed me heaps so far. So you know how sometimes with Pokemon games, it kind of grabs you and you find it's all you're doing, and you're spending just like hours and hours grinding in the long grass and stuff like that. It hasn't really been like that so far. I kind of have sort of been dabbling with it from time to time, maybe like half an hour here and there. So I haven't put heaps of time into it. It hasn't sort of heaps got its hooks in me, but once I have time to put more time into it, I'm hoping it will. What I would say is that I mentioned long grass just before, and probably the biggest thing for me is that long grass random encounters, as they were in every other Pokemon game, are finally almost gone from the game completely. Which
Almost,
which I'll explain in a second. But this was something that when we talked about Pokemon a few months ago on the podcast, it was the thing that I wanted most is for them to get rid of that system, and it's pretty much gone. So how it works now is when there's long grass, you can see the Pokemon walking in the long grass. So if you're looking to catch like a Pikachu or something, if you see it in the grass and you run up to it, it starts a battle with that Pokemon, which is really awesome for catching Pokemon. So it's no longer just like running back and forwards hoping that, the random chance gives you the one you need. You can actually pick out the Pokemon you want and run towards it. When you run through long grass, though, when you sprint through long grass, you do have a chance to have a random encounter with a Pokemon, but there is an option to sneak, and if you sneak, then you can sneak past all of these Pokemon without triggering a battle. And I'm really liking this system because if I'm just done with, pointless battles because I'm backtracking to get to some new area, just sneak my way through the long grass, don't have to have any battles, don't have to worry about it, there's no problem. If I'm looking for a specific Pokemon, I find myself kind of going to the long grass and sort of looking into it and saying like, oh, can I see like the Pokemon I'm after in there and stuff like that? Or if I am just kind of up for some grinding, then I do just kind of sprint through the grass and see what the random encounters throw up, because there are some Pokemon which don't appear in the overworld. I guess they're like rarer ones. You do have to encounter those by just running through the grass. So I think it's a really good system so far, because there's kind of choice, which Pokemon didn't
Yeah.
have before. It was just run through, random encounter, and then be given a random Pokemon. I like that now you can, like I said, you've kind of got choice there. You can decide whether you want to approach it in the same way as it always was in Pokemon, or you can skip that stuff if you really want to.
Yeah, it's actually like proper control, isn't it? Like, and it kind of makes sense from like a encountering wild animals point of view. Like if you were to be running through the woods, chances are you'd encounter an animal before you realized what it was. And otherwise, if you're moving carefully and slowly, you can leave everything undisturbed. So I kind of like that,
Right, yeah.
especially considering like given the appearance change of this and how it's kind of a slightly more immersive world. Like it's not just that top-down view. It's kind of you're in it a bit more from what I've seen. So I guess that like it kind of aligns with that.
It does. It does kind of fit with how this game is sort of different to the other ones, and it kind of fits particularly with. I guess this is, from what I've played so far, this seems to be the big new thing, which is the area of the world which is called, I think it's called the Wild Area, or it might be called the Wild Zone. I can't exactly remember, which is kind of like the open world part of the game. It's a bit like the, you guys remember like the Safari area from the original Pokemon games, which was just that kind of big open zone where there was a bunch of like rarer Pokemon to catch. The wild area is a bit like that. It's a big open area with lots of different kind of environments there, and the Pokemon that are in there change all the time based on weather and time of day. So the idea is that you kind of play through the quest and all the other stuff around, but you can always go back to the wild zone and see what's new there. And
Okay.
it kind of works really well with this system of not having random encounters, because if you go back and the weather has changed, you can see that the Pokemon are different. So you know that like, oh, okay, this is worth me going in and catching some Pokemon and stuff like that. And another cool thing about the wild area is that it's not all sort of restricted to, or you're not restricted to parts of it which are just at your level. So usually Pokemon is like really hand-holdy with that kind of stuff. You so often you end up over-leveled throughout an entire Pokemon game, because it only sort of linearly leads you through each part of the game, and you're always way more powerful than you need to be. My first time in the Wild Zone, I saw, I think it was an Onix just walking around, and I was like, oh, Onix is cool, I'm going to go and catch that. I was like level 10, and the Onix was like level 21 or something like that, and I just had to run from that battle. And I feel like that's not something that has happened in previous Pokemon games, that to encounter something way, way above your level very early on in the game is basically just non-existent. That never happens. And so the wild area...
More often than not, it was like very quickly you'd be overpowered for wherever you were, and you had to keep like a lousy Pokemon story-wise to help you catch stuff, because all of your stuff that you kept with you for doing story missions was just wiping everything out. So it's interesting that they've gone real hard in the other direction. I like it.
Yeah, right. So it does kind of give the wild area this really interesting feel where you see a Pokemon, and I think there's some kind of mechanic where the higher level they are, the bigger they appear in the world, which I kind of was just getting a handle on. That if you see some Pokemon, you might see like a really cool big Pokemon, and you kind of look at it and think like, oh, I got to come back and get that later, because that's going to be way too high level for me now. Whereas previously, I feel like when you encountered a Pokemon, you were always the right level to deal with it and to catch it. So yeah, it's a cool system like that. And like I said, I like the way that the Pokemon change based on time of day and weather. Apparently, there's a lot of multiplayer stuff tied into the wild area, which I haven't looked at all yet. I'm not sure whether you need to... I'm not sure how the Nintendo stuff works. Timmy, you might know about whether you need to pay to play online for Nintendo like you do with PlayStation and Xbox.
I don't think so. I think it's like how kind of what the DSs were, where like you put in somebody's code like for their system. and you could play with your buddies, sort of situation.
Right. Okay. Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know for games like I haven't really done multiplayer on the Switch at all. That was my understanding, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, because I've heard there's some things with the wild area where you can go online and see like other people running around in it, and it's supposed to be kind of like a hub, and you can kind of
Yep.
join up together to fight basically like more powerful Pokemon and like bosses and things like that, which sounds like kind of
Mhm.
interesting end game
Hey-
stuff, especially if like a couple of us have the game.
That could be pretty interesting. Backing up well before
Mhm.
endgame stuff, almost every other Pokemon game, in fact, I would hazard a guess at saying every other Pokemon game, starts off with you were just like, you come of age and you're heading off to become a Pokemon trainer and you want to be the very best. What is the core startup concept of this game? Is it just that same thing? You're heading off to be a Pokemon master, or what's the go?
This is really funny because people listening to this podcast will think that like these are pre-planned questions because you're just hitting on like every talking point that I have in my notes about this game. So one of the things that disappointed me a bit about this game is that outside the slight tweak here and there that this game is set in a different region and there's the kind of context for who your character is and why they're starting off in their journey is slightly different. The sort of beginning of the game and the premise of how everything works is absolutely the same as every Pokemon game ever. Like there is no deviation from the formula here in any way. So you start the game and you go and talk to your mum as you do in every Pokemon game, and she sends you to talk to your friend, who then takes you to the Pokemon professor, or not even Pokemon professor. This time it's like his brother who's the Pokemon champion, but it's the same thing. And he gives you both your first Pokemon, and then you fight him, and then you head off to become Pokemon masters. And while there's sort of little things here and there tweaked, it's so by the numbers for a Pokemon game to the point where like this didn't bother me as much with the 3DS ones, I guess, because they're all on 3DS. But with this jump to Switch, it bothers me that so much of the dialogue in the game is just the same, like literally word for word. Like when you fight a battle, every single thing it says down the bottom of the screen is the same. When you go to a Pokemon Center, they say the exact same things they have for the last 10 years in Pokemon, and everything takes the same amount of time. And that's probably the thing that bothers me most, is that this is like the next generation of Pokemon, and nothing is streamlined. Like everything takes exactly the same amount of time as it always has for like every 3DS Pokemon game, and I find that a bit disappointing that that's how it works. That they haven't modernized any of that stuff. And you mentioned before, Timmy, that the game is kind of more open and doesn't just work from that top-down perspective. It actually most of the time does just work from that top-down perspective. It's just in a 3D world. You have no control over the camera. You can't rotate it around or anything like that. You're on like a set perspective. It just happens to be kind of a better looking world than 3DS games, but functionally it works exactly the same way. In the Wild Zone, you have control of your camera as if it's a third-person action game. And it works like that, and you can kind of go any direction. But outside of the Wild Zone, it works exactly like every other Pokemon game. And I don't know, maybe this stuff for a lot of people is like, it's what they want, It's like the nostalgia of seeing the exact same dialogue in a Pokemon Center every single time you've been in there for the last, like, however many years. But for me, it just feels like, we've moved past random encounters now, and that was such a fundamental part of the game. Like, let's move past these tiny little things that get annoying as the game goes on.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe one way they've approached it is that this is the big change to Switch, and they've done the big thing with random encounters, but they kind of want to set this is just a normal Pokemon game. It's what you know and love. It's a bit different, but it's mostly the same. And so it's kind of like settling on the new platform, and they're going to grow from that. Like it's hard to be satisfied with that, considering they take quite a long time between flagship Pokemon games. I think it's only 3 or 4 years, right, between the big ones. If you
Something
remove
like that.
if you remove like reskinned sapphires and rubies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that was maybe their thinking. If they'll maybe to the team that has been making these games all this time, the Games Freak team, is that what they're called? Games
Mhm.
Freak, I think it is.
Game Freak, I think,
Maybe,
yeah.
Game Freak. Maybe like this is just like felt like a big change to them, you know. So the
Yeah,
other things have just stayed the same.
I think you're probably right. I think it's sort of probably removing random encounters is a big enough change, and there will probably be people who are pissed off about that, so they probably don't want to change everything straight away.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like just if I'm talking about just me personally, like I'm ready for the change. So
Yeah.
I was a little bit disappointed that well, the game looks great and the world looks really cool. The graphics are a huge upgrade, but once you actually play it for a bit, a lot of that stuff is surface level that you could
Yeah.
really strip away all of that. And this is just a 3DS game on a bigger screen.
Mm.
But having said that, like the Wild Zone, the random encounters, those are really fundamentally new systems, and those are really cool. They're not just kind of throwaway things. They're at the core of the game. It changes how you approach catching Pokemon, and I feel like the Wild Zone will change how you approach the whole world because of how
Yeah.
central it is. So, I'm glad that the things they did change are really big changes.
I'm just surprised that like in the coming up to 30 years that Pokemon games have been being made, they haven't like tried a different story, like, and it doesn't need to be way different. You're always going to do the same sort of things, but why not have a game where you start off as like you're a gym leader, you know,
Hmm.
and something happens in your hometown and you have to go off for the benefit of the town, or start off as you were a member of Team Rocket or whatever the latest team is in the game, and you have realized that they're not actually trying to help anybody, they're hurting Pokemon, and so you're going off to strike out on your own or stop them from the inside or whatever it is. There's so many options that feel so Pokemon-y and
Right.
wouldn't stretch much from like the normal gameplay. It's surprising that they've always just gone, hey, you just turned 15 and your mum packed your bag for you and go see the professor that lives near us. Like
Right.
it seems like it wouldn't be very difficult to tweak that slightly just to give it a bit more variety, but who knows? Hey, they're still making millions of dollars, so like why change it, right? People are still buying it.
Right. And people are still buying Switches just to play it, which is basically me.
That is it.
Yeah.
Hey, do you have much else you wanted to talk about with Pokemon?
I didn't have much else I wanted to talk about Pokemon. I was actually gonna segue us and say that you've been playing something on your Switch as well.
Well, yeah, see, I was going to say I have been playing a game that is a sequel to one that I really like that seems to have changed basically nothing apart from swapping to DS to Switch. But for me, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So I've been playing Luigi's Mansion 3. And I never played the first one, but I played Luigi's Mansion 2 on the 3DS and was absolutely besotted by it. I loved it so much. I was shocked at how much I loved it because I think I kind of got it on like a 2-for-1 sort of deal from eBay or something. And I went, just grab that. And it's so much fun and it has so much character. And it really highlights how little character Mario has because, like, Luigi being nobody's favorite, being the second player to Mario's hero, like they've given him so much character and personality to kind of make up for that, And so that game was really good. So I have been hanging out for Luigi's Mansion 3, and I got it as an early present from my lovely girlfriend.
Nice.
And I fired it up, and first of all, it looks fantastic. Like much like the other Nintendo games that started out elsewhere that we've been discussing, they've done a really good job of going from your small DS screen to the Switch screen and then the TV if you plug it in, and it looks fantastic. It doesn't lose anything. But the character of these Luigi's Mansion games is well and truly intact. For anybody not familiar, essentially this is Ghostbusters but with Nintendo characters. You play as Luigi. The last one was in a haunted mansion. This one you're in a haunted hotel by the looks of things. You have a vacuum cleaner that you strap to your back. And the vacuum cleaner has attached to the nozzle also a torch. And so you blast the torch to stun the ghosts and then you can suck them up. And you have a couple of different powers, like you can make it blow in reverse and stuff like that to throw things and whatnot. But that's it at its core. You are essentially a reluctant ghost hunter. The character design for Luigi, he is always shaking and he is always creeping around looking very scared and uncomfortable. He is a total coward and it is fantastic. Anything that happens in the game he jumps at, and it's one of those games where it should feel frustrating because like whenever something happens in the game, he jumps and then there's a little animation and then you can do something, right? And it's never very interesting because they're simple games. It's just kind of like it shows a ghost running around in a circle and then it pans back to you and he's finished jumping and looking scared and then you can finally move again. But it's just so charming. Like the design of this game is so beautiful and it's so sweet and innocent and just so much fun. Like I've only played like maybe an hour, next to nothing. I'm basically in the prologue, but it's exactly what I was enjoying on the 3DS, and so I cannot wait to get further into it.
I was going to ask Timmy, even though you've only played an hour, being a Nintendo game, they tend to be big on cameos. What are some of the other characters that you've come by?
Cool. So in this one, it starts off where you're on a bus headed to this hotel, and on the bus with you is Mario and Peach and a bunch of toads and your ghost dog from the last game. So in the last game, you end up with this ghost dog that kind of like just acts like a dog. It just follows you around. It's just happy to have a buddy, and he has come with you to this game. He sticks around. Mario and Peach were there. It was kind of cool actually because you go up the road to this creepy looking hotel, and it starts you in the lobby, and you can just go around and talk to everybody. And like I said, how I really like these games because they've given Luigi a lot of character and personality. They did that a little bit to Mario in this game because when you're in the lobby and you can go up to him, he's kind of like hovering around this catering table looking at the food, and he's like trying to subtly grab some food when you bother him. And he's like, "Oh, hey, bro," and he like actually like talks to you, which is kind of cool. And yeah, and then Peach was there also. There hasn't been anybody else yet, but I mean, like those two straight off the bat is pretty cool. You all go up to your bedrooms and turn in for the night, and then spooky stuff happens, and Luigi goes back down to the bus and retrieves his ghost sucking vacuum. So I guess one thing I should mention, if you had never played any of the old games, it doesn't really say, "Hey, it's my old trusty this." He just pulls it out and holds it up and it goes, "Da-da," and then he straps it on and it tells you how to use it. So it gives you very little in the way of story. There's not much dialogue. It's kind of all, I don't know, you don't need dialogue really to make it work.
I don't think Nintendo games have really been big dialogue games in terms of, unless you're talking about dialogue written. I more mean, actually voice acting,
or even just particularly big on like story in general. I feel like like that's
the
like
styles.
gameplay has always been like so at the forefront for their kind of like the stuff that they make specifically for their own consoles, which I really like.
I actually wouldn't know what Mario or Luigi's voice really sounds like outside of the expressions they have and their little mannerisms. But if you asked me to do a Mario impression with a sentence, so you wouldn't be able to, because there's not really much you ever really hear him say in any game. So
yeah, I mean, like this is still much the same as that, right? Like the dialogue pops up on the screen and they'll say like a couple of things here and there. Like
right
in the old one, or number 2, Luigi had like a phone that would go off, and whenever you answered it, he'd go "Hello," and that was pretty much the most he said. Then it was like exclamations and stuff, and whoa when things are happening, So yeah,
it just works.
Yeah, exactly. Like but that's what makes it even more impressive to me when they've managed to inject character and personality into that, right? Like I feel like Luigi is a real character now, as opposed to Player 2, the green one.
So I've kind of seen these games over the years and heard so much critical acclaim about them, but I'm not 100% clear on what kind of game they are. So this is obviously not a platformer like a Mario game, right? This is not like the Luigi platformer. Is it something more like a puzzle game?
Yeah, there is an element of puzzle to it. it's not a platformer like the old Mario games where you're just going from the left side of the screen to the right all times, but it is still very much kind of like that. Like now you can move in 3 directions, like rooms have a bit of depth, but it
Mhm.
is still, most of them are set up like you'll be in a hallway and you're just walking along and you can go in either direction and then you might be able to go into a room and explore the room. And there might be hidden areas that you can get to if you use your ghost vacuum to pull on a curtain and then there was a hole in the wall behind there, so you can get through. Or it'll be a new villain and you have to work out how to beat them. It's not just stunning them and sucking them up. There's going to be something else you have to do. So there is an element of puzzling to it. It does have an element of kind of like the the platformer feel about it, just because it isn't like open. There are very much levels to it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's not run and jump and do this. I don't think you can even jump in this really. Yeah, you go through stages and you're solving the mystery, and like it's not just jump on the bad guys.
Right. Right.
It's like, all right, I'm stuck in this part of the hotel, so I'm going to have to find the key, but I don't know where the key is. And so you explore, and then you might find your way into a new area, and you'll see 2 ghosts that are throwing the key to each other, sort of thing. And so you're going to have to work out how to get to those ghosts, how to stop them playing, so that you can get the key off them, or whatever it might be.
Okay. I feel like, from what you've said and from what I've heard about the game, it's probably one that I should kind of add to my Switch wish list now that I've actually got the console. Yeah, sounds like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Like I said, they're just really charming games. Like they don't take themselves too seriously. They're a bit of fun within the suite of Mario Nintendo games, right? I think it's a bit different. Like I personally like this more than say Mario Odyssey,
Yeah,
just
right.
because it's a tighter, more focused thing, as opposed to that was really showing off everything the Switch could do. It was like their flagship game at launch, right? So it was like all these different worlds, and it was like, oh my gosh, look, Mario's in the real world, and you can get all these different outfits for Mario, and now you can throw your hat, and it's completely 3 dimensional. And this is like now you're in the hotel that, and then you're only in a part of the hotel, and you have to problem solve, and it's got a whole lot of character. Like it's not we're going to fit in every kind of world into this. It's like spooky hotel, have fun.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I might have more to say about that when I've played more than an hour of it. But like I mentioned, if you have played either of the previous installments, you're going to really like this one a lot. But JT, what about you, mate? What have you been playing?
I have just gone through my Steam list just today to see if there's some sort of other game I can move on from apart from playing Destiny 2 and The Old Republic. I actually have been getting into a Destiny 2 a lot more thanks to Chim's suggestion of getting into it. So that's one thing. But I stumbled across a game that's been in my library for a little while now called Endless Space. And for the uninitiated, it's basically like a space civilization type game. It's a 4X strategy. And it's been sort of lauded as one of the better space sims out there. Definitely up there with Stellaris and Galactic Civilizations, some of the later iterations of that series as well. But I did have Endless Space 1, but I sort of just skipped straight past that and went for number 2 because it's meant to be the better version. And like you, Tim, I've only been playing this probably for the better part of an hour. But what I've seen so far, I really like. It's a bit of a learning curve that I'm still getting my head around. It's a little bit more in depth than a game like than Civ 6, say, or Civ 5. Because of the scope of having basically a whole galaxy to explore and then do things and conquer and whatnot. But so far, I like what I see. So I'll be getting into that a bit more over the holiday period. So hopefully by next episode, I'll know a fair bit more about it.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, this game is massively on my radar. I don't have it yet on Steam. It's sort of every time it pops up in a sale, I think like, is that the time to buy it? And considering that you're now playing it, JT, this may be the time for me to pick it up now, so we can both be playing it at the same time. But the strategy game that these guys, this is Amplitude Studios, I think, that they made before this was Endless Legend, which was kind of like same kind of thing, like 4X style game. And one of the things I really loved about that game was the way that all of the factions were fundamentally different. So when you play something like Civ, all of the factions are kind of the same. You just have sort of tweaks to each one, like little unique units and stuff like that. Whereas Endless Legend had like a faction that cannot declare war, or a faction that has to declare war with everyone, and factions that use completely different resources and have entirely different gameplay styles. And I really, really liked that about Endless Legend. Have they done the same thing with Endless Space? Do you know?
It looks like they might have a little bit. So they've got the a fair few. I guess you could say they're a bit tropey in terms of their empires that you can choose from. You know, there's like the human one, and then there's the insectoid one, and then there's the one that I would call basically Elder, but you know, a little bit different. You know, they look. I actually really like the design of a lot of the units and things that look really, really cool. But it does sort of look that way. You know, there's a species there that is very, very much scientifically attuned. So that's sort of their, you know, you choose them. You tend not to go to war at all. It actually has a lot of, I guess you would call them hindrances. That if you do choose to declare war on something, that you're sort of not it's not one of their strengths, and not just in battle, but also in their diplomacy and whatnot. So they do have very, very different skill sets, and I guess they've sort of brought that over from Endless Legend. Another game that I do have in my library, but I actually ended up going past it because I played another similar game called Age of Wonders, which is, I guess, very, very similar fantasy 4X game. So it does look like they've brought that kind of stuff over as well. One thing I really liked with this one and Age of Wonders, and that I know is in Endless Legend, is the sort of hero system where you've got a hero of your empire, or perhaps it's like a buffed up unit, but you can actually go in and get items and design your hero's ships. So it's sort of like the same thing as having like a Millennium Falcon. If there was, you know, a rebel empire, you'd have your hero ship would be the Millennium Falcon or something. They've got a similar thing in this, that you can actually design your own hero ship, and it's, you know, really powerful, and that can have all these different weapon modules and things on it, and then you send it into battle to give an army a buff. So,
And so did you design the Millennium Falcon, JT?
I haven't yet. I've got a few ships that I'd love to try and create, like Slave One and some other ones. But yeah, you've got a certain amount of different parts and things that you can actually use to build it with. So I'm not sure how customizable it is outside of things like color, but I think you can use different modules to make it look pretty different. So I'm looking forward to getting into that really, as Paul might say, the really granular sort of aspect of it. So fingers crossed that's implemented really well. But from what I can tell, it has been. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing it.
Yeah, the game's been really well received. So yeah, I'm guessing that they did do that stuff well. I didn't know about that hero system though. That's really cool. I was kind of been craving a bit of a strategy game recently. It's been a while since I've played one, and I was thinking of going back to Stellaris, but it might have to be Endless Space that gets my attention.
Yeah, I really want to get into Stellaris eventually, but this is a little bit more user friendly from what I can tell. The other thing that I thought was interesting, so there's no campaign at all. So when you start a new game, you just start it, and you can choose to start it as single player or multiplayer, but you can have a multiplayer aspect in the single player still. So the game can be opened up so that you can have other people join in on the game as you've got it, however
Like
many turns you've had it going for.
like
Yeah.
halfway through your game, someone can join.
Someone can join.
That's interesting.
From what, yeah, from now, I'm not sure how exactly it's implemented. If they just join and they're a new faction or something, or if they have to take over something that you've already had in the game, like one of the AI characters or something. So I'm not really sure how it's implemented. But the cool thing they've also put in there, instead of having like a dedicated campaign, is you've got quests that you can uncover as you're playing the game. So for people who have played RTS games or basically any other strategy game, the game works as a skirmish. So you set it up with a different bunch of parameters and then you press go. And then from that, you can uncover quest markers. And those quests are actually a bunch of, I guess I should say, a series of mini campaigns that all link in with each other. And they don't operate in a vacuum per se. You finish one, and the implications of whatever you did in that quest have consequences outside of it as well. So it's a really cool way of circumventing an actual campaign, which a lot of people might not like, but I'm actually really keen to try their take on that.
JT, I got to say, I am seriously doubting that you've only played an hour of this game.
I mean, going by the tutorial, it crams a lot of stuff
Okay.
in what they've got so far. So I've really only gone over the interface.
Uh-huh.
So a little bit of what I'm saying is basing it on what I've played and also just the Steam store page, which goes through all the features.
Gotcha.
And also, reading a few of the reviews, I've gathered a bit of extra info. So what I was just mentioning about the quest system is something I haven't experienced firsthand yet, but yeah, it's in there somewhere.
Well, I look forward to hearing about your feelings on that, like once you've actually experienced it yourself. But while we're on a roll of talking about games that we've played barely any of, and so probably should not be critiquing at this point, I also started another game a little while ago. I cracked into Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. And now I have never played a Metal Gear game before, but I thought I knew what to expect. I'd played like a little bit of Ground Zeroes when it was like the free PSN game, and you're just kind of like crawling around like a base in Afghanistan, just like taking out guards and stuff. And I watched a friend play part of Metal Gear Solid 2 when I was really young. It was kind of like a friend's older brother, and I didn't really know what was going on. I just watched it for a bit. But I had it in my head that we're talking about just like a kind of like a tactical espionage kind of game. I knew that like Hideo Kojima is a pretty kooky dude, and so I know that like there was some weird stuff with like in 2 you're not actually Snake, or there's weird stuff going on. But the thing that struck me just in the prologue of Phantom Pain is how much supernatural stuff there is. It's bonkers. There was so much going on, and there was so much supernatural stuff that is as yet unexplained, but seems to just be forgotten when I think it should have given everybody PTSD. And like, I was floored by what this game is so far. Have either of you guys played any Metal Gear before?
I have never played a Metal Gear game.
I have played 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 2, I would say that I half played it because me and a friend finished it together. But obviously we watched it all go down. And this is what I really want to know what your take is on number 5, because I started watching a Let's Play of it when it first came out on the net. And I watched a few hours of someone playing it. And all I could think was how wacky that universe got, because number 1 and 2, even though there are elements of things like psychic abilities, they are like such a small portion of what the game is, and it really is a tactical espionage game. That's what the root of the Metal Gear Solid series is, hands down. So for it to go from that to where number 5 is, I was just like, I didn't know what to say. I'm in two minds about it. I'm probably a bit impartial to the idea of where 5 went, but having not seen all of it, I can't really say much more. But yeah, it is really, really wacky where they took that game.
So Shayla absolutely loves the Metal Gear series, and she's played this one in particular a bunch of times and loves it. So I feel like my relationship is on the line, and I'm kind of playing this game with a gun to my head. But that said, I am actually really enjoying it. I was just like really floored because I'm not going to spoil too much because I haven't played enough to spoil anything. But I think I might talk through the prologue just to give you, Paul, an idea of what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I really liked, the game fires up and you are in a hospital bed and you have been there for an undisclosed amount of time in a coma and you've just woken up, right? And you are missing an arm for a start. And I thought that's really cool. I like that you actually have an impediment there, like a serious one. Like you've got like a little stump and then they give you like a little claw thing to try and hold stuff with. And you can't really move. And all of the game starts up and someone comes and kills your doctor and nurse, and it's implied that like you were someone important and you saw some things, and now that you've woken up, people are trying to take you out. And so that sounds like, all right, we're talking espionage here. But by the time you are out of your hospital bed and everything's going down, so someone's tried to come and kill you, and then they've gotten into a fight with the person in the bed next to you who was supposedly watching over you, and then and you're crawling out of your bed, and troops are storming the hospital, and this is still making sense. You're some military guy, they're trying to take you out, but then all of a sudden there is just somebody who is like a giant fire monster walking down the hallway. And he's impervious to bullets, and he is just taking out all of these soldiers, right? And then there's like another character who's like this person in an undone straitjacket with a gas mask on, who also can like shoot flames and stuff, and they're like floating, they're like levitating, and there's all this stuff going on, and like you keep nearly getting it, like, and I'm going, am I meant to be hallucinating right now? Like, how come I keep only just avoiding getting killed by this thing which is taking out every soldier? It doesn't feel like it's just because I'm the main character in the game. It feels like I should have definitely died there, and something keeps diverting this.
And is there no precedent for any of this in the previous games? Like I said, I haven't played any of them.
I couldn't tell you.
I would say not really. I'm not sure what really happens in 4. I don't remember the premise too much, and I didn't play it. But 1, 2, and 3, and I'm obviously talking about the new Metal Gears, not the old NES, SNES ones that came out. But yeah, it doesn't really. There's no real proper segues into what I saw from at least where number 3 left off. Even though they've got some pretty convoluted sort of storylines in 1, 2, and 3, there's nothing really like what hearing Timmy describe. That doesn't really go from there to there very well. So maybe something in 4 happens that I'm missing.
But yeah, now that I have finished the prologue and the next mission, like at the end of that, I got picked up on a horse by a character from the previous game, like Shayla. I was like, that seemed like I was meant to know who that person was, like the musical cue and the reveal of his face. She was like, yeah, that's someone, don't worry about it. And he's taken me off to Afghanistan, and now I'm infiltrating like this terrorist holdout who have one of my allies in there, and I'm just rescuing him. And it's a completely normal, like, counter-terrorism kind of mission. And there's nothing about that. And he has not said, hey, who were the 2 people that could shoot fire from their bodies in the hospital? Like, there's just been no talk of it. Now it's just like, now it's what I expected the game to be. So I'm really curious. I know, like, Hideo Kojima is a singular game developer, right? And there's every chance that he's not going to explain a lot of the things I see in this game. But I'm expecting big things still, and I'm hoping, there's a little bit of explanation. And if there's not, I'm sure I'll be able to look it up. But it's piqued my curiosity, I'll give you that.
Classic Hideo, the David Lynch of gaming.
Yeah, and I will just mention while we're talking Hideo, Shayla and I just bought Death Stranding as well, and I think she's playing it right now as we speak, and I've been watching some of that. So once I've had a bit of a feel for it myself, I'll have to report back and let you guys know what that one's like.
One
That one looks
great
even
thing,
weirder.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Oh, dude, it's bonkers already.
One thing I've always loved in, I say Hideo, you say Hideo. What
Mm-hmm.
what is it?
I don't know. I mean, like, I'd imagine it would probably be Hideo, right? Because like Japanese tend to not put much emphasis on any one syllable, like we tend to in English. Like we say Hiroshima and they say Hiroshima. So I'd imagine it'd be your way, but
Right.
I say
Yeah, I'm
Hideo.
not sure. I've never actually heard it really say out loud. So,
Hmm.
but one thing I've always loved in his games, and I'm really probably just talking about the Metal Gear Solid franchise here, is that he likes to break the fourth wall, and he does it so well. So that's a little heads up for you, Chimmy, is that there's going to be some cool little parts in it like that for you that well, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe he didn't do it in the fifth one, but it's something
Yeah.
that traditionally is in the Metal Gear Solid games.
I guess I should mention that like the gameplay is really, really solid so far. Like,
Metal Gear Solid?
yeah, absolutely. The gameplay is so Metal Gear Solid right now, and like I feel like it's got a lot of moving pieces and timings and stuff that are very impressive. Like I'm moving around this whole campsite and this outpost, and it's going from night to day, and that changes visibility and how far I can see and how far away I can be seen from, and like I can hide bodies, and I trank darted a whole bunch of people, and then I was piss farting around, like collecting everything and just getting lay of the land. And everyone started waking up again, and I'd used all my trank darts, and so I was like, "Oh crap!" And like it was it was cool because like it's not like and now they're awake and they're all going to start come looking for you. They kind of all get up and they look around, and some of them panic and just stand right where they got knocked out, pointing their gun at every corner of the room because they're still confused. And some of them who were in the street will kind of wander off and stuff. And I'm finding it like really immersive, which I'm really enjoying. It's not easy at all either. Like I'm learning to be a lot more patient than I have been in other video games. Like I thought I was being patient, and I found that I was not at all. It doesn't like really clue you in on when someone can see you until they've seen you. It's not like, you've got a little radar in the bottom corner that shows you where everybody is. You actually have to be aware and alert and take your time and look at things from every angle. So it is really cool, and I'm actually really keen to play some more of that one and see what the ratio of tactical espionage to bonkers Kojima shit is.
Keen.
Alrighty, Paul. Me and JT have been talking a whole lot here. Let's cross back to you. What else you got?
So yeah, I've got one last thing that I wanted to talk about this episode, which is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, we had mentioned before that we might do a separate episode going into spoilers and everything on this. Doesn't look like that's going to happen now. And as I'm the only one who has played it, I wanted to say a little bit more about it than what I said a few weeks ago. Much of what I said then holds true in terms of the good and the bad. So the gameplay sort of stayed really engaging as it was after I first started. So the challenge level of the game being a little bit different to something like Force Unleashed, having to think more about combat and be a bit more slower and methodical. That stayed the same throughout the game, and I really loved that. I would take this style of Jedi game over another Force Unleashed style any day of the week. And the balance of combat with non-combat stuff like exploration and puzzle solving also stayed top notch throughout the game. It really nailed that in a similar way to stuff like Uncharted, that combat came in these kind of short bursts, and then you'd spend 5 or 10 minutes kind of puzzling your way through an area and things like that. And I really, really liked that. It didn't feel like I was just playing kind of a straight up action game. It felt like it was something more. So I really liked all of that. All of the negative stuff I said a few weeks ago stays true as well. The game runs like absolute crap, and even after being patched twice while I was playing through it, it didn't get any better, and all the same issues remained, and that's all quite disappointing. Hopefully in future games that gets a bit more attention. But the thing that I particularly wanted to talk about, having finished it, is the story. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything here, obviously, because you guys haven't played it, and people listening may not have played it either. But overall, I really, really enjoyed the story in this game. I mentioned last time we talked about it that it's a bit more grounded than previous stories, so you're not kind of like, taking on the whole empire and trying to kind of change the universe. It's a very sort of narrow focus story about a guy who used to train to be a Jedi, kind of trying to get back on his feet. And the game does a great job of building its own characters rather than just relying on ones from the movies, which recent Star Wars games I think have done a bit too much. But instead, this game develops some really good characters of its own. There's one in particular who I don't want to mention because spoilers, but they come into the game quite late in the story, and for my money, they are far and away the best character in the game. And I was really disappointed that they weren't introduced earlier. But in general, the characters in the game are really strong. It's really good stuff. The game does a really nice job of tying in its story with events that we know from the movies. So things like Order 66, which is kind of such a big iconic thing in the Star Wars movies where all the Jedi were killed, that's really important to this game, but not in a way that has you, fighting Anakin Skywalker as he's trying to kill the younglings or something stupid like that. It's like Order 66 is important, but you're off in a whole nother part of the universe or another part of the galaxy where, like, you're not sort of directly interacting with the things we see in the movies, but you're still feeling the effects of that.
It's probably one thing with Star Wars universe and perhaps in the games more so is just how localized everything becomes in terms of settings and characters and a lot of the lore, because they've got so much cool stuff. They've got a whole galaxy of rich story to draw stuff from, but it quite often ends up becoming this tiny clustered little I guess ball of certain characters and interactions
Who are all related.
Who are all related, yeah, all related, and there's always something grandiose is always happening. It's one thing that the Old Republic is just horrible for in terms of its story, or ends up happening. I won't go into that, but that's really refreshing to hear that it's a little bit more of a measured approach to the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, like the events of the game are hugely important for the characters in the game, but in the grand scheme of the Star Wars universe, they are not particularly important, which is really cool.
That is really cool. That's like almost like what it would be like if you had like an entire galaxy in which this story was concerned, like that should happen more often,
Right. Like I've been struggling a little bit with my relationship to Star Wars over recent weeks, and actually in just a few hours' time, JT and I are heading off to see Episode 9 at a midnight session. But I've sort of been struggling a bit with where I stand in terms of modern Star Wars, and I have been frustrated by the way that sort of recent offerings make the Star Wars universe feel smaller. And I really like that this game makes it feel bigger, that you interact with things that but you're not running into people from the movies every 5 minutes. You're in places that either we haven't been to before in the movies, or that have been mentioned in like the Clone Wars TV show and things like that. And it's just the way it sort of fleshes out those little corners rather than just sticking to the stuff that everyone knows is really, really good. I mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about it that the premise for the game was really interesting because we know that this game is set between Episode 3 and Episode 4, and because we've all seen the original trilogy, we know how things end up, and there are certain things in the premise of this game that we know can't happen because we know what the Star Wars universe looks like. And the game does a really, really nice way of resolving those plot threads without doing anything kind of stupid, without having any big contradictions that don't work with the movies, or without having some kind of huge backflip at the end which changes everything. it just kind of all wraps up in a nice way where this story feels complete and is satisfying, and then it doesn't mess up anything that we know comes afterwards in episode 4.
Does it end in such a way that you think they're unlikely to try a sequel? Like, if it's satisfying and it takes us to the status quo we're prepared for, does that read to you like if they do a sequel, it's going to be set at a completely different time point, not follow on from this story?
This is a really interesting point, I think, because for me, you could leave this game where it is and
Mhm.
never go back to it again. Historically, unfortunately, I feel like that's not what the people making these things feel like. You know, there is always room for a sequel no matter what. But I think you could leave this and not tell the story of Cal Kestis any further than we get in this game. I think it's interesting that the game is titled Jedi: Fallen Order, because I feel like what we get next will not be Jedi Fallen Order 2, it will be Jedi: something else. And
Okay.
I quite like the idea that they've got some really, really solid mechanics here in terms of Jedi gameplay. So the lightsabers are fantastic, the force powers are really good. That's not something that is connected to just this guy. You can do this for any Jedi ever. So the next one could be set in the Old Republic era or something like that, and it can still be a Jedi game. So I'm really interested for them to keep making this Jedi franchise, but I'm not particularly bothered about whether they do it with these characters.
All right, that's really cool. I like that concept that they kind of set up. You know, we're going to do a series and it's going to follow Jedi's, but these subheadings indicate completely different stories. Yeah, that's cool.
Right. I guess that's kind of speculation at the moment, but it does, it seems interesting that that's how they've titled it.
That would solve the problem we were talking about when last we spoke about this game, about how if they did a sequel, if they'd have to find a way to strip you of all your powers again, so there would be progression throughout the game.
Exactly.
If you're always starting as a new Jedi or whatever, they've got potentially different powers and different power levels to play with.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives a bit of leeway there, and I think also with the story of these characters, like I kind of mentioned before, they tie it up really nicely. You probably don't want to push it too much further because sometimes with some of this expanded universe stuff, I feel like we end up in a situation where the movie of episode 4 is all about how Luke's kind of like one of the last Jedi. But if you look in the expanded universe, you can find like 50 or 60 other Jedis who are floating around at the same time. And
and way better than just some kid that just bumped into a Jedi for the first time yesterday.
Right, and for people like Han Solo to not be believing in the Force, you kind of need the Jedi to disappear a bit. So
yeah,
I think it would be good if they kind of left this where it is. But anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on Fallen Order. Like I mentioned at the top, we're probably not going to do an expansion episode on this one, but yeah, I would highly recommend it to Star Wars fans specifically. But that is all the games we have been playing in the last fortnight. We're going to take a quick break, and then we've got a few listener mail questions we're going to answer to round things out for the year. So we'll be back with more talk of games.
All right, welcome back. Now, of course, we are coming up to Christmas. It is the season of giving. So we thought that we would give back to you, our listeners, by responding to the emails in our inbox, because we actually have a few this episode. Feel free to ignore the fact that all 3 of the letters we've got this week are from the same person. That's irrelevant. It's going to be excellent content. But thank you, Flynn, for sending in the many questions you have, and we'll do our best to give you some coherent answers to them. Paul, do you want to hit us with the first question?
I will. So the first email from Flynn reads, "Greetings, Witcher 3-ophiles. Thoughts on the upcoming Witcher Netflix series? Is this going to be a glorious homage to your favorite game or a sacrilegious money spinner taking advantage of a great game/book?" So we are a gaming podcast, so we don't usually talk about TV and movies, but at this point we're almost more a Witcher podcast than we are a gaming podcast. So I think we will stop to discuss this one.
Look, I think Flynn nailed it when he called us Witcherphiles at the start of this email.
Exactly.
Now, I have many thoughts about this. You know, when it comes to talking film and television, I can go. So I'm thinking maybe I'll let someone else go first. So, JT, did you have any thoughts on the Witcher 3 series?
I am pretty keen to watch it, obviously, but mostly just, I guess.
Sorry, can you just keep talking in single words? I am pretty keen to. You're basically Stephen Hawking up in here right now.
I stop, stop, keen stop. I'm one of those people who love seeing, regardless of how bad or good something is, I just like to see something adapted to something else and seeing
Whoa.
how it's done.
All right, Paul,
so-
rebuttal.
I'm already frantically typing.
But I guess in this instance, I'm really interested to see. Obviously, where the series goes is always a pretty big plus. But I'm really interested to see where they decide to draw the line on Geralt's emotional character, because for those who have played the game, he is very much middle of the road in terms of his emotions. So I'm interested to see what they do with that, and obviously where the greater story goes as well, because I know it's probably going to be a fair bit different to what the games draw on. What about yourself, Paul?
Well, I guess just to sort of follow up on what you said there, I wonder if it being a younger Geralt will give them scope for more emotional stuff, as you say. Like, you know, the TV show being based on the books, which I haven't read, and I don't think either of you guys have read either, perhaps gives them a bit more freedom to do something with a Geralt before all that stuff has happened. Like, you know, like I said, I haven't read them, so I don't really know how he's portrayed in those books. But maybe that's why they chose to set it then. I'm not really sure, but that is kind of interesting. In terms of my expectations for the show, as Timmy kind of hinted towards, I could not be more opposite in my opinions on adaptations, I think, to you, JT. Well, my general attitude towards this stuff is like less is more. And I think this is particularly when it comes to TV and film adaptations for me. I don't need or want a movie or TV show for every property I like. And I personally feel like the strike rate for this stuff is woefully bad. And I just think it is so common that the point is missed by whoever is adapting this stuff. I also feel like this kind of specific example doesn't have a great track record in terms of a quick adaptation of something that is in right now. Like there are some very good adaptations out there. You know, something like Game of Thrones is a great example, but Game of Thrones wasn't made because the books were massive. Game of Thrones was adapted because it was, you know, a good story. And something that, like, Timmy, you and I have talked about recently, like the Watchmen TV series, again, like, that's not being made because Watchmen is big right now. It's just someone making a good TV show. And I'm concerned that this show is being made because The Witcher 3 is a massive game, not because there is a good story to tell here.
Yeah, look, I come down kind of between the two of you, and at first I was leaning much more heavily into Paul, your opinion. I had very low expectations for this. When they said that Henry Cavill was campaigning to get himself the role, I was like, good luck. That's such horrible casting. And then he got it, and the internet seemed to be really happy, and I was confused because Geralt's this gravel-voiced, older-looking man, and here's Henry Cavill with his deep, sonorous baritone voice and nice smile and bright eyes and stuff. But you know, the latest trailer we saw, like, he kind of nails the voice in a couple of points. It's not exactly the same, which is, you know, fair enough, but sometimes it sounds great and he looks okay. But then, you know, a lot of the stuff we saw coming out of, like, you know, the Novigrad army's armor and stuff was just like horrible looking. It looked like we were watching like Kevin Sorbo Hercules or like Buffy. Like, it was just such like almost like cosplay more than like what you expect to see on TV, right? There was lots of cause for concern. And, you know, I'm, again, like you said, Paul, I haven't read the books. I've read part of the first one. And this seems to be more based on the books, or that's what they've said. and they've gone like it's going to be a younger Geralt before the events of the game. But then it's like, but you've got Ciri in it, who is older than the Ciri in the first two games. You know, like they're doing weird things. So you kind of have to go, all right, they're setting it in its own thing. Forget the books, forget the game. Hopefully, it's a good story. But the trailers still have been hit and miss, right? So I really don't know how to feel. But I saw this thing on IMDb just a couple of days ago, and it was like Henry Cavill uh, introduces you to Geralt of Rivia, and it was kind of like Henry Cavill speaking to camera about the character and how he brought him to life and stuff like that, interspliced with a lot of footage that we hadn't seen in the trailers. And obviously, because this comes out tomorrow, right? Like post production is done on this show now, and it seems like they've done a lot more since even that last trailer we saw, because I was much more impressed looking at this because he was talking about Geralt. They had more of him talking and stuff, and I kind of liked his voice and his very dry sense of humor. He wasn't really expressing much, and like I was worried that they'd try to go down the route of like he's not meant to have emotions, but he's this emotional character because it's television and they want to give him depth. But I'm not seeing too much of that so far. And they actually also showed him fighting like a giant spider in like a swamp, and I was like, I really like that they are leaning into big, silly monsters. Because, like, you know, I was worried that they'd try to Game of Thrones it, you know?
Mm.
You know, like magic exists, but it's kind of like, you know, it's a cool real world take on magic. But this was just a giant spider in a swamp, and he was just wailing on it with his sword and stuff. And they showed him using the one of the signs, the telekinesis one, Axie or Quen or something, and blasting someone down a hallway, and that looks cool. And so I'm like, I'm heaps more open to this now. Like I was really on the fence, but I'm kind of going in cautiously optimistic.
On the point you said about like it being set in the past but having Siri and stuff like that, I have heard some unconfirmed, I should add, but some sort of rumors and suggestions about characters being cast who are stars from The Witcher 3 and things like that, which, you know, I feel like if you're going to do this, you like do one or the other. Like, don't do the prequel younger Geralt based on the novels, but then cast the Bloody Baron to be part of it because everyone loved him in the game. You know, if you really want to do that, then set your game after Witcher 3 and continue that story there. So I'm, you know, I'm concerned that they will try to, I guess you'd say, kind of have their cake and eat it too here with telling their own story, but also making all the tie-ins with the game that are possible. But like you say, I guess we'll find out in literally a day. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. So I guess that's the question. Are we all going to watch it? I'm definitely going to watch this, probably tomorrow even. I'll watch the first one at least.
Yeah, I will watch it, or at least I will start watching it. I like if I don't know I have pretty short patience now for TV shows that don't grab me unless they're called Star Wars, which I will keep watching even if I don't think they're very good at all. So I don't know. I will start watching this, but yeah, you know, if it doesn't, if it feels like what I am concerned it will feel like, then yeah, I won't stick with it for heaps long. JT?
If the first episode doesn't suck, I will continue to watch it. So, but I'm sort of going to go off of the first episode a fair bit because a bit like what you said, Paul, is that if I'm not drawn in straight away, I tend not to invest the time after that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you know,
I think there's so much media out there to consume now. There's no excuse for it not being engaging, right? That's its one job. So you don't owe a show, you know, two or three episodes that gets really good, you know?
right. I was about to make that exact point, Timmy, that like there is so much like absolute top quality TV specifically that is out there that I haven't got a chance to watch, that I'm not going to watch one that is just okay because it has a video game character I like.
Yeah. Yep, I've just ditched a show that is based on one of my favorite books that has a cast I love, that is made by HBO. It should be a home run, and I have no idea how it's so average. Like, it's the only HBO show I've ever watched that I've gone, what the hell? I don't know how it's on that channel, but anyway.
Second question.
Question 2.
Yeah, second question from Flynn is. He says, I'm considering buying a Switch to get into the new Pokemon, but I'm unsure if it's worth buying a new console just for one game. Could you give me a quick rundown on some other Switch must-play games to help convince me to take the plunge? And he says, P.S. I've played Overcooked and it's great. So this is interesting actually because my attitude, obviously I've just bought a Switch, but my attitude to buying kind of second and third consoles in a generation is I'll buy the console when I would spend the value of the console itself in must-play games, if that makes sense. So if a PS4 is $500, I won't buy it until there's $500 worth of games that I absolutely have to play.
Which is only like 6 games, if you're buying them new.
Right, it is, but I guess when you're talking about this stuff that like you're limited to just exclusives in that sense, because anything that's multi-platform I'll play on the Xbox. So for something like the PS4, it's got to be 6 must-play exclusives. But I think if we're talking about Switch, Timmy, you're the expert among us. Like I've just got mine, and so I've only played Mario Kart and Pokemon. But what would you say are the must-have ones?
Well, I think like Nintendo have always carved out that niche for themselves of being like the ultimate party console, like the one console that you'd fire up if you had like 6 people around, And I mean, like you said it right there, Mario Kart. Is there a bad Mario Kart? I don't think there is. They're all fun. They're all frustrating as hell, and that's the point. And like everyone's keen to pick it up. Like the 3 of us have played so much Mario Kart, whether it's a drinking game or not. So that sells itself. I was singing the praises of Link's Awakening just the other day, and I think if you are into Pokemon and enjoying that Link's Awakening style of gameplay, you're going to enjoy that as well. It's not unlike the older Pokemon games, except instead of turn-based battles, it's in the moment. Nothing wrong with that. Zelda Breath of the Wild, while I'm talking Zelda, huge. Such an incredible RPG. It can be so zen, and then it can be so difficult, but like kind of like The Witcher in that you can go up against something way too powerful for you, and if you play carefully and take your time and plan, you can beat it. And that the stamina system where you can climb up anything if you have a big enough stamina rating means that the coding in that world is incredible. The way everything interacts physics wise, it's an amazing game. That alone is worth getting a Switch for. Like that and Pokemon, like no brainers if you ask me. And then I mean, I was just talking about Luigi's Mansion 3. I love it. I don't know if it's Flynn's kind of game. I don't know if I could say it's a must-play game for like anybody, but like generally, I think it's pretty cool. And then the last one, I didn't mention this episode, but since last episode, we've also grabbed the latest Mario Party, and that's just another really good party game, as the title might suggest. I've been really digging it. It's a lot of fun. It's essentially a board game on your Switch with a whole bunch of different mini games, and yeah. NPCs if you don't want to play it with just you and a friend, or you can have 4 people. Really good fun. So I think those sell it enough, and there's plenty of other things. He mentioned he'd already played Overcooked. Well, there's Overcooked 2 now, buddy. So you've got more than enough to get you across the line, I reckon.
I guess it leads into Flynn's third question, which we'll get to in a second. But there is a lot of stuff on here that you can play with 2 people, cooperative or competitively. So there's a lot of, like you say, party stuff in terms of like Mario Kart, Mario Party. But like Overcooked is great with 2 people. Like Mario Kart is still good with 2. I don't know, Timmy, have you played Snipper Clips?
No.
This was a game that it was one of the ones that I had my eye on while I was thinking about getting a Switch. That's another really cool sort of cooperative game you can play together. I feel like there's a bunch of stuff like that, which if you're looking to use it with someone else, then I think it's pretty strong in that department.
I also think games like Paul, you spoke pretty extensively in the first year of this podcast about Stardew Valley. And that's available in the Switch store. And I feel like that game would actually be quite nicely suited to Switch. I feel like you could sit there and play it on your TV if you wanted, but it would also work nicely handheld as something to do on the train or the bus, or even just sitting in bed kind of situation. And there's kind of little games like that. Like it's got quite a good online store.
That's a really good shout, actually. I was going to mention that now especially heaps of stuff is being ported over to the Switch. I guess because it has sold well and the console is a hit, like everyone wants to get their stuff on there. Obligatory reference here that The Witcher 3 has been ported to the Switch. I don't know if that's really where you'd want to play that game.
Nah. I noticed Alien Isolation has just been released for the Switch.
Right,
Which seems nuts to me, but like that's a fantastic game.
Yeah, I think if you have an Xbox One or a PS4, then a lot of this stuff you would rather play on that. But Stardew Valley, actually, that's a really good one to pick out. I hadn't thought of that. There's probably a bunch of stuff like that which has been brought over from like mainly PC that is really, really good. But yeah, I think that's kind of our recommendations for buying a Switch. Let us know how you go, Flynn. Let us know if you do buy one. And his final question that he has sent in is, as I kind of hinted before, is about two-player games. So he says, my wife and I really like Coup, but find that it is not as good for two people as it is for a group. Could you please give me a recommendation for a good tabletop game that is optimized for two players? It doesn't have to involve deception, although that is a fun aspect of Coup. I'd also prefer a competitive game rather than cooperative.
Now, I really struggled with these parameters, and I felt deeply ashamed I consider myself a tabletop guy, right? And thinking 2 players, preferably not co-op, that alone was really difficult, especially then if you want the deception stuff. Deception stuff doesn't work so well with only 2 players, I find. Like Coup is about the only one. But just touching on what you referenced before, Paul, I actually did write down Mario Party for this. It is essentially like me and Shayla were just playing it. So it was me and Shayla, and then they added 2 NPCs in there. Heaps of fun. Like every mini game is different. Sometimes it's everybody against everyone. Sometimes you're in teams. Sometimes it's 1 versus 3. And then, you're moving around the board. You've got different items. Heaps of fun. Like the hardest thing I struggled with this was finding 2-player games that were competitive. And so that was definitely one of them.
I also struggled a bit with this one. Like there's the obvious suggestions which we've talked about a lot on the pod. So things like Magic and Keyforge, the kind of like, collectible card games. And that's not for everyone. If you're kind of looking for something a bit simpler, that's probably not what you're after. Although I did kind of want to mention that if you're looking to get into that, I'd probably say Keyforge is the better self-contained one. If you want to just sort of buy one box and be able to play without spending more money, I think Keyforge is the way to go.
Now, one thing I struggled with is, I was trying not to just think of card games because, there are heaps of them. You got Magic, you got Keyforge, you got the Call of Cthulhu card game, you got Android Netrunner, right? Like, but they're all getting more and more complex, right?
Yep.
And, so I was trying to keep away from that, and I really, really struggled, to be honest. But I have a couple here. I spoke about Villainous a few weeks ago, and that one goes up to 4 players and more with expansions. But I've only ever played it with 2 players, and I really enjoyed it. I probably would need to play it a little bit more before I could give it a real solid recommendation. But that one definitely works, and it does have an element of deception, not so much because people can't see what your character is or what your motivation is. That's all very clear, but you can go about your mission in sneaky ways. You can play quietly and make people not realize how close you are to your end goal, or you can be brash and bluff and talk like you're going to win it on the next turn to try and make them play more dangerously and impact their own play. So there's that. The one that I think is the best 2-player game I've ever played, Paul, that's not a card game, is Dead of Winter, though. And we talk about this all the time. Right. You and I have played heaps of this alone.
Cooperative, I guess.
It is cooperative, but you have your own objectives as well. And so it is entirely possible for one of you to win and the other one not. And it's not necessarily deception all the time, but there is an element of dishonesty to it, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, if we're kind of opening it up to co-op, and I know that Flynn was sort of specifically asking for not co-op, but the more I thought about this, the more I kind of thought like, there's some such great co-op games out there for 2 players that it's kind of worth talking about them. I also thought of Pandemic, which I have played with 2 players, and same. Again, like a few expansions for that, so you play through it a few times, and then you can get like the expansions that do different things, and this is sort of more in your wheelhouse, Timmy, but I think a lot of the kind of Lovecraft type games can also be played cooperatively with two, like stuff like I can't remember the name of it, but the one that's like Arkham, whatever. Arkham Horror has like a card
Yeah.
game version which can be played as two.
Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror and Elder Sign can all be played with one player. So yeah, they can all be played with two players for sure. You don't even just need that card game.
Right.
You can play almost all of them. I wrote down Elder Sign because Shayla and I have been really enjoying playing that together. Again, it's cooperative, but it's kicking your ass so hard that like, you know, and there's an element of, you know, you getting trophies that you can trade in. So you can kind of, you know, feel like you're winning if you really need that competitive edge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I guess the word that made this hard was optimized. Optimized for two players. Very few games are. A lot of games are like, you can play this with two players, but it's almost always better with three or four, especially competitive, because when you play a two-player game that's competitive, it's very clear who's winning. And you can kind of, a lot of the time, see the tipping point. I can't really come back from here. I'm going to have to play 25 minutes of slow defeat now, you know?
Yeah.
One I did pop down on my list here that I'm not sure if I played this with you, Paul, but is a good two-player game that 2 to 4 or 5 that is definitely competitive is Suro, spelled Tsuro.
Is that the one that has the kind of like, it's like a red and white or yellow color palette, and it's got a bit of a kind of like, it's like a almost like a dragon art style type thing?
That's the one. Yep. You have a square board and you put pieces down on the board that have tracks, and whenever you put a piece down, any person's like game piece that connects to one of the tracks has to follow the track. And so you want to keep your piece on the board while forcing everybody's off of it or into each other.
Yeah, I liked that one. It's kind of, it doesn't have a very strong thematic element compared to something like Coup or Dead of Winter.
But it's got a lot of strategy and very simple gameplay.
Right. It's very good on kind of the puzzle strategy elements and stuff like that, which I enjoyed. So apart from that, the only other things that I was going to mention for this were when I was sort of thinking about this question, I did a bit of Googling about it, and I read that there are a few kind of iconic games that have been rebalanced for two players. And the two that I wanted to mention here, I don't know if you guys have played these at all, were Rivals of Catan, which was like Settlers of Catan remade for a two-player, sort of a two-player setting, and also Codenames Duet, which was obviously Codenames, which we've talked about on here before, and which, you know, I think it maybe actually Flynn is familiar with. I think I've played it with him before, and that Codenames Duet is rebalanced for just two people, which Codenames wouldn't normally work with just two because you need kind of a leader and stuff. And Codenames Duet would work with two people apparently. So I haven't played it, but maybe that kind of stuff is worth checking out.
Again,
Codenames Duet is cooperative.
Yeah, I was reading up on it as well. I was doing my research, and it said Codename Duets is a cooperative version of the game.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if this is still a winner, but you're working together to decode things, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So our recommendation is ditch the competitive requirement because there's loads of good two-player co-op games.
Or just play Mario Party. Get that Switch, man. Do it.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, those are the three emails that Flynn had for us. So we're going to leave it there for this episode. Although we might quickly mention the games we're going to play in the month or so that we're going to take off because, we're not going to have an episode in 2 weeks. We're going to take a break for the Christmas and New Year holiday period, recharge our batteries, do a bit of gaming, and then we'll be back after that with a fresh 2020 episode for you. But JT, what kind of stuff are you planning to play in the end of this year and the beginning of the next year?
I'll be continuing my journey with Destiny 2, seeing where that takes me. Keen to get into some of the end game content there eventually when I'm finished. Endless Space 2, obviously, as well. So I'm looking forward to being able to talk about that a bit more in the next pod. And probably some more Project Zomboid with you if we actually ever get around to setting up our computers to do it again. Normally we hang out and we just watch some movies or something. So hopefully we do get into a bit more Project Zomboid. Timmy, how about yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just started those couple of games I talked about, so I'm keen to play a lot more of Luigi's Mansion 3 and then Metal Gear Solid 5. I really want to kind of have a crack at Death Stranding to get a bit of a feel for it, because watching Shayla play it, it looks like it's got some really interesting mechanics about just moving and the weight of your character and how you control that. So I'm interested to see how that translates to feeling when you're playing. Um, she's playing it right now. She's been messaging me going, "This game is amazing." So I'm very excited. Hopefully, I can maybe even crack into Pokemon. I don't know. I'm not going to get too much on the go at once, but I'm pretty keen to. There's a bit of a backlog. I saw Outer Worlds in a store again the other day and realized I'd forgotten how badly I want to play that again. So who knows? I'll get to something. I've got some time off from work, so we'll see how much I can get through.
Just too many games.
Too many games.
Yeah. Well, I'd be keen for some Project Zomboid. We've talked about this a bunch of times now. JT and I have a real problem of planning to play Project Zomboid and just watching classic sci-fi movies instead, which we really need to sort out. Yeah, I guess I'm going to push on with Pokemon. I think if I see Endless Space 2 come up in like a Steam Christmas sale, I might grab that, because like if you're playing it now, JT, it's always fun to kind of discuss that stuff when you're both doing it. And with this new shiny PS4, I might give that a go. I'm not sure what I'll play first. Maybe Spider-Man, maybe Uncharted 4. But I'm also hoping I might get some tabletop board card game kind of stuff in over this holiday period, because, you know, probably going to be catching up with a few family members who are into that. I know that, Timmy, you might even be gracing us down here with your presence for a little bit. So hopefully we can all get together and maybe play a bit of something. So hopefully we'll have some dice to go with the discs.
Fingers crossed.
And as always, of course, if you want to get in touch, if you want to send us some listener mail or some suggestions for the next year of episodes, something to kick us off in the new year, you can always get in touch with us, discanddice@gmail.com. And of course, we're on all the social medias. You can find us at facebook.com/discanddice. We're on Twitter @discanddice. And yeah, you know, subscribe to the pod, rate the pod, review the pod, all that kind of stuff. We appreciate everything like that people do. But yeah, that is it for us for this episode and for the year. So thanks to everyone who tuned in along the way. As we said before, we're going to take an episode off. So we'll be back in around a month's time with our first episode of 2020. But guys, thanks for joining me for the whole year and for all the discussions along the way.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And we will see everyone in a few weeks for, of course, some more games.
Games.
Welcome everybody to Disc and Dice number 24. I am JT, and I'll do that again. Sorry.
You forgot your name.
Yeah, I am JT.
I am Jared.
Yeah, right. And I think that coupled with like I lost my train of thought.
Oh
like
dear!
Actual just
holy
brain
moly.
snap. Hang on a sec. And then we'll be back to talk about what we're planning to play in the next month.
Games.
JT, say games.
Balls. Games.
This was a topic that we kind of been thinking about.
Oh,
doing
okay,
for a little while.
Yeah. Hang on.
Nothing
man.
specific, I don't think.
Something
You got some
is going
screaming
on.
kids.
Can you hear that?
I heard it while you were away as well.
Yeah. There's a cockroach in Lincoln's bedroom, and it's freaked him out. Hang on, I might have to go and just check out what's going on. Sorry, guys. Be back.
The best thing is
JT,
I got
get
all
your house
this.
in order.
I got all this.
And we will catch you guys next episode to talk about some games.
Can you do that last line again? Because you cut out halfway through it.
Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time to talk about some more games.
Could you do? Oh man, so bad.
Did it do it again?
Yeah,
Exactly the same.
exactly the same.
Like, the same syllable.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Oh.
Cool. Here we go. Third time's the charm. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time about some more games.
Oh my god.
Seriously?
That one was worse.
Oh my
that
God.
one was worse.
Okay. All right. I know. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you next time to talk about some more games.
Man.
Are you serious? Someone else fucking do it.
Yeah. All right. All right. So these are the levels for the level
Good night, Carter.
testing. Good night, Carter. JT, say good night to Carter.
Good night, Carter.
Say a bit more.
Good night, Carter. Good night, Carter.
And this is the volume I'm going to speak on when we're recording the podcast.
When you say good night to Carter.
When I say goodnight to Carter.
Games.
Games.
Done. What a mess of an ending.
Did
Well,
I
it
fuck
end-
that up?
No, not at all. Paul just got confused.